I'm going to pick up on where Jeff Campbell left off and said something about you got to eat your own dog food. And yesterday I sat around listening to Andrew McRoberts, who was the first guy I've seen in a long time not use the hideous PowerPoint, and was using a wonderful program called Mind Manager, which you're getting an example of on the screen. So I immediately went and downloaded it and started playing with it and thought, what better way to use a new advanced technology tool to try to guide our discussion. And what I tried to do, just sitting over here in the last few minutes, is try to capture some of what I think we've heard over the last several days and use it as a tool to guide our conversation about what's missing, what we should add, and what our next steps are. If you look up on the screen, we'll see at the center our commitment to a digital pathway, our call to action, an effort to be relevant. I want to start with that, an effort to be relevant. This isn't the only broadband conference going on in the world. It isn't the first group that thinks you ought to call somebody to action. So I want you to be thinking through the discussion, why are we different? How are we going to make a difference? Because just like Congressman Meek warned us, go ahead, produce a report, and it'll join the list of hundreds of reports that come in on similar or related topics, and our time will have been spent in vain. So give that some thought as we think about what our action steps are. How do we get attention? How do we do something that other people have not done? At the top of the chart, you'll note what Bill was saying, which I think is so important. I mean, reconceptualizing the digital question, the broadband question, away from the notion that we're talking about a utility service. This is not just oil, gas, water, and sewage, right? We think that there's something bigger here. If there's one thing that seems to distinguish human beings and relationships in mankind, is that we're communicators. We have a highly developed sense of information, communication. It makes us different. So there has to be something different, I would submit to you, in the communication revolution than just another infrastructure innovation. And I think as I've sat at the FCC and spent the last decade talking about these issues as Bill has, I think one of the reasons it fails to garner national imagination and national attention is because it gets relegated sort of off to the side at the FCC and public utility commissions around the country as if it just belongs in the same bucket of stuff that we attend to in those agencies. And in doing so, and I'm one of those regulators, we somewhat semi-condemn it to not enjoy the kind of national imagination, national ambition that embodies the role of someone as prominent and central as the president. You're not going to get the president's attention if all you're talking about is, where wires go and how they connect and why. You're only going to get that level of ambition and boldness if you think equally to match it. So I think the first thing we should think about being committed to is, A, walking ourselves away from that way of talking about the problem. Right? I even hate more and more when I hear people talk about broadband or the broadband policy. Ask your neighbors if they know what you're talking about. I would submit to you most of them don't. They just know they go on the internet. Right? They don't know. They didn't remember when it was narrowband or broadband. They don't know what 768K is versus 1.5K versus 10. They just want to go on the internet. And they want to go on fast. And they want to go on a way in which it's on all the time, like their appliances and their microwave ovens and their clocks, and unfortunately their televisions. They want it on and available to them. They don't want to think about, broadband speak is regulator speak, is utility commission speak. We have to talk in the language that consumers accept. Bill made this point. I think the first thing you say is, this is a tool, a component to solving national challenges. Okay? Broadband is healthcare, broadband is education, broadband is job creation, broadband is a way to tackle the energy and environment. And we have to go out and talk about policies and challenges facing America and why we think as a community who've experienced firsthand and with enthusiasm and excitement a digital revolution, a technological revolution that has introduced what we used to call in the Army a combat multiplier. What's a combat multiplier? It's a big honking tank when the other guys don't have it. That's the way I like to have it as a tanker that I was. Right? You have something that overcomes your numerical disadvantage, or some kind of disadvantage, right? This is my combat multiplier. It's 2 of us against 1,000 of you, and we'll lose unless we have a combat multiplier. So in our world, we should be talking about broadband and digital technology is our combat multiplier. If healthcare has been an intractable and mind-numbing problem, right? I've listened for 20 years to politicians who are going to come to Washington and solve the healthcare problem. Right? Mrs. Clinton went to Washington almost 16 years ago saying the same thing. What's going to be different? Ladies and gentlemen, the healthcare problem is fundamentally a cost and access problem, and it's a heavy information industry. Right? But I still go down to CVS drugstore with a paper prescription written by a doctor that I can't read, and I assume is accurate. I hand to another person who reads it, types in the computer. I have no idea what that does, and then it supposedly compares it to other stuff that will kill me, but I have no idea if they got that right either. And I walk away with a yellow pocket of pills that God knows what they're going to do to me. This is still the system. You know, some of you know, I spent a lot of time in the hospital years ago after a bad accident. I got x-rays this hot. Right? They're in my basement in a box. God help me if I need them. You know, God help me when I go to the chiropractor and I'm like, this shouldn't hurt. If you looked at the x-ray, you'd know why it does. Well, it's an information problem. This is what data and digital systems should do. If you could dramatically lower the cost of healthcare, provide greater access, you would be tackling the healthcare. But I have listened to, I'm no healthcare expert, but I've listened to a lot of healthcare policy speeches and presentations. I've gone to healthcare conferences. There's nobody up there thoughtfully talking about this. Every now and then you get an e-records movement or something. But it's not bold, it's not confident, it's not ambitious. So let's start with that, right? We're not separate, we're not distinct, we're not a bunch of broadband technophiles. We're Americans who care about the problems facing our country. And Americans who believe that a component of solving the problems for helping our country include a better understanding of the power of this stuff, combat multiplier. Number one, I've heard that a lot in the last 2 days. One thing that seemed to make this conference interesting is its commitment to focus on demand-side drivers, right? Again, let's be careful. This is all econo speak that the average person doesn't get. All right, so let's not run around talking to our citizens, our customers, and consumers. These are the demand-side effects of the macroeconomic digital system. They don't know what you're talking about. Speak English, speak simply, but we know what it means. But what we're talking about is, look, we spend a lot of time talking about pipes and wires and rights-of-ways. Again, this is utilities language. This makes most people, other than those sick of us who enjoy it, numb out and disengage from the conversation. Right? They don't want to hear about AT&T's problem, Verizon's problem. They don't want to hear about your regulatory battle over whether pole attachment rates are adequately calculated between the cable and the telephone industry.
Amen, Mr. Chairman.
Don't get me going.